Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of my Bigfoot sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings all happened in Ohio and pretty much all the different counties thereof. So my first encounter I've ever had in my life had to have been 2012. I'm not sure the exact dates because 2012 was right around when my dad was reading the books about the Hunger Games, and that's when those all came out, the movies and that. So that whole night before, we were at this gigantic event. It was like this kind of Boy Scout type thing. We were all running around the woods, being kids. And I knew about the Sasquatch. I knew they existed, and what you're supposed to do is the hoops and the hollers and the banging on trees. And that's what I was doing. I was running around like a kid, 12-year-old me just banging on trees, hooping and hollering, thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna see me a Bigfoot tonight. I didn't see a single thing. So we all go to bed. I remember, like I said, my dad was reading that book right before bed. And my one buddy, he's like, oh, you read that book so fast and whatnot. But this is where everything got interesting. In the morning, I just woke up. It's kind of fog. It's that time period where it's not sunlight and it's not pitch black darkness. It's that gray time period where you can see everything perfectly. So I get out of the tent. I don't know why I was the first out. I remember kind of looking down the tent line. There's maybe one or two people just kind of stretching, getting out of the tents. And I see this creature. It had to have been easily 200 or so yards away. I remember seeing it, but I saw it super well from the distance. I saw it from the behind, the backside, and I remember seeing the shoulders. The shoulders were really large. I can't quite remember the color again because of the light. It could have either been gray, it could have been brown. But what was odd about this encounter compared to all my other ones is it had the domed head. It had the egg-shaped head. I kind of saw that, and I don't remember if I told my dad, hey, I just saw a Bigfoot or something like that. I just think as me, I was like, whoa, that was that. And I just moved on with my day-to-day life at that point in time. And that was pretty much it for 2012. I might have heard some knocks. I might have heard or seen some structures during those time periods, but I always shrugged them off as maybe kids or maybe, oh, cool, it could have actually been a Sasquatch, you know? But that's all I ever really saw. And my next encounter had to have been my scariest because it was the most different looking Sasquatch I've ever seen in my life. I don't even think it was a Sasquatch. I think it was actually called Grassman because that's what the area in Mohican, the Sasquatches in those areas are called Grassman. So the Grassman I saw, I was on this in Mohican. It's a state park near Ashland and Mansfield area. It's a combination there in Ohio. We were going on this cross-country camp. I was there. I was running. I was really exhausted almost all the time because it's nothing but hills. And for a guy that's used to back roads and stuff, I'm just running up and down these hills. I was in last place in that race. So I'm all the way in the back. There's only one other person behind me, and it's this girl. But there's just easily the soybeans in this time period, they came up to my knees. And I'm a tall dude. I'm about 6'1", 6'2". And that's what I remember. I remember running past this soybean field, and I'm like, wow, these soybeans are really tall. And as I'm looking at these soybean fields, that's when it comes out of the brush. I kept telling myself for the longest time, this had to be a 3-minute long encounter. But now when I look back at it now, I remember everything was in slow motion. Its arms were barely moving. It looked like it was gliding. It hadn't been 3 seconds. It crossed this field In easily 3 seconds, it was easily about a football field wide or long. This creature was a darker brown in color, and it had black coloring in it. It was like dark brown, but it had individual black streaks in it. And kind of like dogman hands, it had long claws. I can remember seeing the thighs. They were very muscular. This wasn't like the classic Sasquatch where they all say they're really bulky, really buff. This thing was very sleek, like built like a very professional runner, but double my size because I'm a scrawny dude. This thing was huge. I remember seeing its claws, like the arms. It's pumping like a runner. It's pumping those arms. And I see the claws and I'm looking up and that's when I see the face. It was not normal. It had a round head, slightly domish, maybe oval, not quite egg shape. This is what got me so creeped out about this encounter is it did not have eyes, or if it did, it was covered by hair. And normally when you're seeing something run, you're watching the hair part on its face and whatnot. It was not moving. The hair on the face was slightly shuffling, but it was not blowing out of its face. It was covering its eyes. It even covered the nose. The only patch of discernible feature on the face was the mouth, and they were fangs. They were like the dogman fangs in a sense. They had 2 protruding canines on the top and 2 protruding on the bottom, and a row of very sharp teeth in between each fangs. It just looked like it was nothing but eating meat. It did not look like canines or not canines, like molars or normal flat teeth. There was like nothing that I could see that would just say flat teeth on this thing. Here's the odd thing about it. As soon as I looked at it in the face, I felt sick. I felt woozy. I felt like whatever was behind that hair, those eyes had to be red. And I don't know why I thought that. That's just the immediate thought I had when I looked at its face was those had to be red eyes. And this encounter, it was gone. It took off so fast and entered the other side of the trees, because this whole area was pretty much like a trees on each side except for the road where I was running on and that one field. And it was just gone. I knew it saw me, and when I first saw it, I thought I was going to die. It's like, if this thing decides to turn at 3 seconds, I am going to die. I cannot run. I cannot escape this thing. Once it was gone, I just stopped running. I don't know why. Most people would probably just take off running after seeing something like that. But no, I stopped. And I'm looking around like, please tell me there's another runner with me. Please tell me I'm not the only one that saw that. And this girl comes running up. I'm like, did you see that? She's like, no, I was just back there puking. I was really slow and really sick and whatnot. I'm like, I just start laughing. I'm like, I think I saw Bigfoot, man. And she's like, oh, okay, whatever. And like, let's just keep running. I'm like, all right. And that was that. We just ran all the way back. I got to the end of the thing. It was like a good, fun cross-country camp. So we hopped in the inner tubes. I was quiet. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I saw. And I'm thinking, that wasn't Sasquatch. Sasquatch don't look like that. What I kind of forgot to say about the first encounter was I somewhat saw its face from the front, and I knew it had like the eyebrows, like the ridges where our eyebrows are. I saw it had those, and I could see eyes from the corner, but I could not see them. The one I saw had hair covering its eyes and its nose. All I could see was those razor sharp teeth. And what kind of sucked was that was the only thing I really paid attention to. I did not see if it had abs. I didn't see if it was hairless on its stomach. I didn't see any of that. I only noticed the razor sharp claws on its hands. It had big hands that went almost down to its knees. But it was pumping its arms and whatnot. And it freaked me out. But I went back to that camp, and my coach, he's had encounters and was a big believer in Sasquatch. And I don't know if I told him, but I tried to tell him later on in life. But my mom at the time was like, oh, you can't just see Sasquatch more than once in life. It's like getting hit by lightning twice. I'm like, all right, fine. Just interrupt me like that. I'll just walk away then. So I think that happened in either 2016 or 17. And then my next encounter, I went off to college that year for interpretation and whatnot, and it was a Hawking College area. So this is Athens, Ohio, where the legend of Grassman actually came up about. And the whole area is nothing but hippies and backwoods people and whatnot. So I was with this one hippie girl, and I think it was just a day off and whatnot, and we were going to go hammocking. Her and her messing around buddy and whatnot. But we go up on the trail. I don't know what the actual place is called, but this is what the girl called it and everyone else. They called it Bong Hill. So we go up there, and it's a nice, decent hike. It's a tall place, and there's nothing but rocks, like big boulders and whatnot, and deep, deep brush. Now, me being who I was, I've seen 2 Sasquatch in my life by then at this time period. I'm a firm believer, and I'm like, all right, let's do this. So I'm taking this little baseball bat, maybe no longer than a half a yard at the most. I take it out of my backpack. I give a couple good old knocks. I can give another knock, and I'm like, God, this ain't gonna do nothing. And then these 2 hippies are just sitting there in their hammocks and whatnot. They're like, hey, come over here. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I walk over here. That's when I hear it. Big, bold knock. I'm like, oh my gosh. I look over at the hippie girl, and she kind of grins at me and nods. So I'm like, you heard that too, didn't you? And that's kind of when I peek around to go look. I go over in that area, and I see a shoulder. Like it's hunched down, like it's trying to do an army crawl, but I see its shoulder and then start to ridge up to its head behind a tree in a rock ledge area. And I get nothing but fear in my gut and everything. And I'm looking at these guys and like, we got to leave now. We got to go now. And I eventually convinced these guys to get off the side of the mountain. And we crawled down there, and that was pretty much it. It was completely uneventful. I forgot to mention this about the Grassman encounter in 2017, because that one was 19. But I believe it was not much bigger than or taller than me. It had to have been a younger Sasquatch, the one that had the hair in front of its eyes. But that was pretty much it until I think in the time period I met my wife. We did all of our fun stuff back in the day in college stuff. Eventually came back up to Ashland, Ohio, where I saw the Mohican Sasquatch, the Grassman thing. And we hiked trails and we chilled out. And we just loved being out in nature. And what we actually did was, I just kind of told her, I was like, do you want to go on a squatching expedition? Because she was a believer. She's actually had Wendigo and other encounters in the I think it's Blackfoot, Colorado, or Blackfoot Mountains, something like that. They called it either Wendigo or Sasquatch, or maybe even it might have been a dogman. I'm not sure. But up there where she had it, they had her dad, stepdad. They were all camping there. They had, I think there was a trailer, her sister and her mom. But they heard, there's just weird things happening. There's stuff being thrown at their trailers and whatnot. But what she literally told me was her dad, he's been in hunting all his life. He knows all the animals, bears, whatnot, Colorado elk and all that. This roar or growl lets out, and he just pretty much takes up the shotgun and says, I do not know what that is. We're getting out of here. And that was that. She was a kind of believer in Sasquatch before this big encounter in 2022. So I told her, hey, we're going to go out Sasquatch hunting. So we're going to go squatching. Because I used to do that all the time, but no one took me serious. Like, oh, we're just going to go run around, chill out in the woods and pretend like we're hunting Sasquatch. I'm like, guys, I can actually show you these creatures if you're willing to listen. But no, she was excited. So we go to this area where I believed they were at, because just being around them, I start to notice stuff out of the corner of my eyes, like, oh, that had been a Squatch or whatever. But I never really counted them as sightings. I always counted seeing them with my actual eyes, like, whoa, that was definitely a Squatch. So I kind of figured out where they were at, where they're moving around at. So we go to this area. I'm not going to name the trail per se, but the place, it was always creepy. So we go there and We were actually violet hunting. We were looking for violets to make violet jelly. And there's nothing but tree structures in this area. We know a little bit. We learned a little bit from Todd Standings, from his stuff, because I guess maybe a lot of the stuff he could say is right. Maybe a few of it is wrong. I don't know. But we said, all right, this is the tree structures. So my wife goes up there, and as we're walking up to this tree structure, we are hear an audible crack. I'm not sure if it was a snap of a branch or a knock. I'm not 100% certain, but it was one of the two. And either me or my wife was moving. We kind of looked at each other and was like, you heard that? So she calls out and says, we're leaving this for you. She takes a bundle of dandelions and violets, they're edible plants. So she puts them on a log, and we slowly back out of that area. At the time, we kind of go back and keep picking dandelions actually farther away from this area, but we're close enough to the exit of the trail, so we're feeling safe. Now here I am, kind of freaking out because I'm like, hey, I've seen these things before. I know how powerful they look like. I know what they can do, and I just sit there. I keep feeling like I'm being watched. That good old classic feeling when you know something is hunting you. Either hunting you or just staring at you. And I'm looking, and I know where it's at. I can tell where it's at. I just keep looking in that area, and I'm like, come on, show yourself. And I see a flash between the trees here or there. I try to point, like, hey, it's right there. It's right there. You got to look right now. Nothing. We just don't see nothing. So what we do is we eventually just pick our violets and whatnot, and we leave. We gave them the offering and just kind of left. We come back a day later with a friend of hers. So there's 3 of us. Now we actually go up to the same exact spot where we left the offering, and the offering was gone. Now this could have been any animal, right? But not a lot of animals in this area, unless a deer would eat like dandelions. Now there's a couple on the ground that were sprinkled there, but the big pile we left there was gone. But as all 3 of us were in the same area, we're checking for this creature. We hear the same thing, and all 3 of us were actually all still. We hear either a snap or a knock near this tree structure, and we freeze. And we hear it again. Now, behind this area, we're actually closer to a field on the other side of the undergrowth here. There's nothing but these odd tree structures, kind of going back into this really thick part of the forest, which we didn't go past the tree structures. We were kind of terrified. But there's some big trees that are snapped over. And my wife, being in Alaska, she knew what snow breakage is and whatnot. And she's like, this isn't snow breakage. I know it isn't. And so that's her tracking skills telling me all about this. I'm like, all right. So we confirmed that this is what that is. Now we go back to this area. I can't smell anything because my nose at the time was damaged. But my wife was actually pregnant at the time. Then my friend couldn't smell it. But when you're pregnant, your nose or your scents are hypersensitivity. She keeps smelling this awful, awful smell. This horrendous smell. Like, I don't smell it. And that's when I see it. I actually see what looks like a den, like a bunch of branches all piled in this tight circle. And it looks like it's hiding into a creek bed. So all of it's branched off there. And it had to have been 40, maybe 50 yards away at the time. We hop off the trail and get closer and closer to it. And by then we're easily 20 yards away. That's when I started to smell it. And I couldn't describe the smell. I really couldn't save my life. But then the friend that was with us was like, it just smells like rotting bologna. Like rancid, rotting bologna and terrible smell. And that's when it clicked in my head. I was like, oh, you're actually very right. That's what that smells like. But I tried to get closer and closer to this den. I have binoculars. I have a monocular that I was passing back and forth between all 3 of us. And I'm looking into this den. And I freeze. Because it's looking right at me. I'm freaking out. I'm like, I see it. I see its eyes. They're pitch black. Could have been the shadows, but they were shiny beetle black, staring at me. This Sasquatch was completely different from the other 2. It had to have been really young, and I think that's actually what it was that's why he was or she was in the den. And I see it. and its head is very round. It has the weird little squished nose and whatnot, and its eyes are pitch black. It has darkish gray skin. Its hair was really dark, and then its head goes back into the shadows. I step forward one more step, and I forgot to say this. Everything in the area was dead quiet. Nothing. My wife was actually about to tell me, do not step past that. But it was too late. I stepped past it. I stepped in front of a tree break. Every single animal in the area, because there's a small lake nearby, which I didn't even know there was geese in the area. That's how quiet it was. Tree frogs, bugs, geese, everything explodes into like full on freak out mode. The jays are screaming, everything in the whole area was screaming at me as soon as I stepped past that area. And my wife was like, all right, we got to back off now. Everyone walk away slowly. And that's when I hear it. A crazy, deep, guttural roar. And I'm freaking out. I'm half crying at this point. I'm shaking. Kudos on the two women that were braver than this this guy that's freaking out that there's Sasquatch right in front of him, growling, creeping me out, and I freak out. I don't know what to do. I'm in a panic. I'm like, all right, do not run. Listen to your wife. Do not run. So I'm following them. I'm snapping branches and crashing through stuff, just trying to get caught up to them. And then when I got caught up to them, I'm walking up to the trail. And we can still see the den type thing. I'm looking into the den and I see a hand once or twice. I see the face once again. And my wife says, pass me the binoculars. Pass me the binoculars. And at that exact moment, I'm actually stuttering again because I see the face again. I'm staring into the darkness, looking at it, looking at me. And I'm like, I'm stammering. And she's like, give me the binoculars. As soon as she says that, she just grabs them from me and takes them away. She's like, oh my gosh, something just ducked down over there. I think a bigger one across the lake. She said it was so big, she could see it across the lake, but it just ducked down. She said it was huge, but that's all she saw of it. At that point in time, she hasn't really saying, okay, I fully believe. I could tell on her face, she's like, all right, I don't fully believe yet. And then like we're kind of keep looking in the den, and it's dead quiet as we get back up to the area. She's looking in the den, and then I see it change on her face. I actually have a picture of how her face changes. I'm like, right there, that made you a believer. And that's what she says. Oh my gosh, it's literally a taut standing Sasquatch. She's staring at it in the den, and I'm just like, yes, I have someone with me that's seen it. And like I said, I'm freaking out. I'm pacing because I'm a naturally fidgety dude. So I'm pacing back and forth, freaking out. And she sees it. That was it. She's just looking at it, and I hear it. And me being a natural birder, I know almost all the birds in the area. I know all how birds. This is where it's so odd. This chirping sound comes out of nowhere, super loud. It just goes chirp, 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 steady, no nothing, and it goes on for maybe a good 15 minutes, and that gives me chills. It just keeps going chirp, chirp, chirp. Then it hit me. I was like, somebody record this. I kind of always yelled it like a big jerk of me. I'm like, somebody record this. So we actually get on recording, and I hear it, and I know it's not. It could be a bird from this area, but my wife, funnily enough, said when she had her Wendigo encounter, she heard the same exact bird. And that's what kind of creeped me out. She didn't tell me that until later. So eventually the bird stopped chirping, or squatch, whatever it was chirping. It just stops chirping. And we actually move farther down the trail, and we find what looked like a good size 12, maybe smaller foot indentation, like from the heel back. We go back to the other structures that were built in a more of a teepee structure. And apparently Todd Standing says that's an okay structure. You're allowed to go past that or whatever it was, because I walked up to it and I even kind of climbed into the thing and was looking around. Not nothing. I don't see nothing. But yeah, we look around. We go to this other area where we think they're at. I know we had encounters in that area. I think it was we heard another growl or a moan, heard large footsteps. But then we actually go back to that same area where the den was. And we keep just trying to look to see if we can see anything, but we eventually don't. So we start leaving. And the smell of the rotten flesh or whatever it was followed us out of the forest. I kept seeing something pretty much escort us out of the forest until we hit right around where we first left the offering. And then whatever was following us stopped. It just stopped following us. I think we accidentally came upon a small baby Sasquatch den. And the one that I actually saw was a very young one. I would say for how big the den looked, its head couldn't have been maybe twice the size of mine. And the things like the adult ones I've known, I've seen people say that it's maybe triple or even 4 times the size of a human skull. It wasn't that big of an animal. But its eyes are so dark. They're really oval, almond shaped. That was what was looking at me. And I've been meaning to go back out to that site ever since that happened. And one thing or the other has gone astray where I just haven't gone out there. My wife, she's like, I want to go out there. I want to see our Sasquatch. I want to see him again. And I just haven't gotten around to it. I might actually go out later on. But I don't want to take an almost 5-month pregnant lady on like a deeper hike. And if something goes wrong, she can't run. I mean, it's not like you're going to actually outrun these things to begin with, but at least you'll have a chance to run. You just can't run. We hiked out of there at a brisk pace. I would rather, if I go out there again, maybe having 1 or 2 more people. The same lady that was with us, she said she wanted to go again. And she also showed no fear. But like I said, I was the guy that's actually seen these things at least 3 times before that encounter. That's pretty much all my encounters.
My Bigfoot sighting occurred October 12th, 1992. It was kind of an interesting lead up to what had happened. I had been into Bigfoot stuff for many years. My dad had bought me a John Green book when I was younger. And so I just was very fascinated. The Patterson film, all that stuff. At the time, this is pre-internet, right? 1992. But I knew some people, Matt Moneymaker, who's with the BFRO. I knew him way back then. And one of the things was just starting for some researchers was sound blasting, where you would take simian noises, gorilla calls, purported Sasquatch screams, and then blast them out into the wilderness somewhere and hope that something comes back, right? You hear something. Or you might initiate some interest in something that's out there and it may come to investigate. So Willow Creek, California, as a lot of Bigfooters know, is this cool little town off the coast about 30 miles. And there's a lot of Bigfoot themed stuff around there. The Patterson film was shot near that area. So I thought I'd call the Information Bureau there. The Information Shack, actually. And I was interested to see if there were any mule packers or horse packers in the area. To go back, there were some ridges I wanted to really go off-road, way back in. So I talked to the lady on the phone, and I didn't broach the topic of Bigfoot right away. I just asked her if she knew of any horse or mule packers. And she said, no, I actually don't know of any in this area. Then I broached the topic of Bigfoot. So what do you think of Bigfoot? Is it real, just a myth, whatever? And she said, well, I'm skeptical. I've lived here all my life, but I know a lot of people around here who I wouldn't call cuckoo or too exaggerative, who have found footprints, seen something, heard something they couldn't explain in a known category. And then she says, it's a little funny you're asking me this because a guy just called here yesterday, very emotional, down near the mouth of the Klamath River, near a little town called Requa. And he was all emotional because his son and his son's friend had come running back from a creek about a quarter mile away where they said he had seen this approximately 6 foot tall, light colored, beigeish, grayish, ape-like thing staring at them. Now, the father, before his son had come back, was, like a lot of people, very skeptical of the Bigfoot. Oh, it's just a local myth. But he said, I remember him telling me several times, look, I know when my son's lying. He was not lying. He was genuinely frightened. The other kid was frightened. It seemed like they were telling the truth. So he had called because he knew Bigfoot, or rather he knew Willow Creek was this area where Bigfoot stuff allegedly happened. So he left his number. And again, such an odd coincidence. I called that lady the next day to find out about the horse packing. And she was cool enough to say, I don't think he would mind. Here's his phone number. So I talked to the father for about a half hour, and it just had the ring of like these kids really saw something unusual, and that they weren't joking, or you just, you talk, even though it's a second person being relayed, a second person account relayed, it just had that feel like something was up. And I remember feeling that it was probably Bigfoot related based on the description they were saying. I pick a buddy of mine up, lives near the Bay Area. I was down in LA at the time, and I wanted to go up and interview these kids. Dan, my buddy Dan, was probably still is pretty skeptical about the whole Bigfoot thing. So I thought it'd be good. It's kind of a possible good cop, bad cop interview thing. Well, we go and interview these kids separately, and there was no contradiction between their stories. They were basically in this dry creek bed, quarter mile away from the house. One was 12 and one was 8. The 12-year-old said he looked up, and standing on the embankment, roughly 100 feet away, was this beigeish, grayish, ape-like, yet man-like, standing straight up, just looking and not acting menacing in any way, just staring. So he saw it. And then, as he recounted, he said he called the other kid's named Joshua. Joshua, get over here. He comes because he was over looking for snakes elsewhere. Joshua comes over. He sees it. They both said they looked at it for approximately 15 seconds. I think one of them said to the other that, I think that's Bigfoot, or I think that, And then they hightailed it back to the house. They turned and ran to their right. And I'm pretty sure one of the kids had said when they started to run like that, it began to turn, to walk away toward the base of the hill. Where this thing was standing was about probably, I'd say, 30 yards from the base of a very densely vegetated, steeply sloped hill. Very jungly. And it was one hill that on the other side of the little valley where these little homes were, there's another hill just like it. So it's kind of one of the brackets of this valley that goes back a good, probably 2 miles. So they go back, tell the story to the father. Father calls Willow Creek. I find out about the call, blah, blah, blah. So we go up, and I wanted to look where they said it was standing. There was an interesting indentation in the vegetation there, roughly the size of a Bigfoot, if you will. But because it's vegetation, you're not getting a lot of detail as opposed if it's sand or mud or something. So I thought that was interesting. But what was interesting, or the most compelling thing, was the veracity of the stories of the kids. They were I didn't get any sense of BS from them. They just seemed to be telling the truth. So what to do now? Well, I had to get back to Los Angeles. I decided, talking with the father, we'll keep in contact. So now the father's suddenly interested. He's a former Bigfoot skeptic. Now he's like, look, I know my son. He's not lying now. So he starts inquiring about this area. He going around talking to locals. He finds an old, and it's still there to this day, on a side road there. You can find somebody had carved a Bigfoot gravestone, and the guy's name was on the bottom, and he contacted the guy. And why did you put a gravestone? He goes, well, we had a lot of sightings years back, and I just wanted people to believe that Bigfoot was dead, meaning that I think he just didn't want people snooping around there because it's a very bucolic area. It's very pristine and jungly. So it was his way of saying, all right, you meddlers, stay out of here, type of thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. As it turned out, I was heading back up in that general direction to do work. And by the way, I had at the time the worst job you could have if you were serious about Bigfoot. And that was I was a stand-up comic. I'm a bit of a joker myself, talking to people. So when I would broach the topic, half the people I talk to would kind of wait for the punchline. I goes, I'm serious. I know, I'm serious. I like to joke around, but I really think there's something to this phenomenon. The father and I keep in contact. What are we going to do next, if anything? What is next on this? So the father, Daryl, finds out, he goes again as part of his checking out the locals thing, that an older couple that lived about 3 or 4 miles away owned this hill. They owned the property on this hill that the creature had walked back towards. And by the way, if you go back into the bottom of that hill, there was still old remnants of barbed wire. We looked around that day when we found that impression in the vegetation. So when we went and talked to them, Daryl had already talked to the lady, but I witnessed her, if I'm remembering correctly, that we said, so what about Bigfoot? And she just looked at us kind of like, oh yeah, we know they're there. Like very matter of fact. If they had had a sighting, they said no, they had been there 30 years, but they had had 2 Native American friends from, I believe it was the Yurok tribe, maybe one from Yurok, one from Hoopa, who had road nighttime encounters, like crossing roads. So they just always accepted that, yeah, there's probably something to it. So we asked them if it was cool, if we could go up, because this was their property, could we go up this hill? And she was like, yeah, sure. Go anytime you like, please don't bring any guns or, no, not interested in that. We just want to get to the top of the ridge, because at the top of this ridge, you could see from the valley below, there was a remnant of an old logging road. So what we were hypothesizing was that maybe there's some footprint evidence up on this old road. The next day, and I don't believe we told her we were going the next day, we start up this hill. And this is a steep, like 30, 35 degree, big ferns. You have to hold onto the ferns at times to kind of pull yourself up. Little game trails here and there where deer had made their way up. But it was, as they say, very squatchy. It was a very steeply sloped, densely vegetated hill. Now, as we're going up, if somebody told you they saw a bear at point A, and then 3 weeks later you went to that point, you're not really expecting to see the bear, but you're keeping an eye out. So I think it was definitely my attitude, and I think Daryl's as well. And it takes us a while to get to where we wanted to go on this hill. And what we were aiming for was this huge, I believe it's a Douglas fir. It's near the apex, the top of this hill, probably close to 100 feet high. You could see it. You're under the canopy and you're going up. Oh, there's the tree. So if you lose sight of it, you just keep looking for that wide tree. So we would zigzag. We'd go to the left. It was too steep. We'd go to the right. It was literally, like we should have had a machete. That's how thick some of the areas of the hill were. So we finally get to the tree. That took us, I don't know, probably an hour, because we were slow, listening, and nothing happening. And so once you get to that tree, the hill starts to level off a little bit. It's like if you were at 30 degrees before, maybe even 35, it then levels off to about, I would say, 10 to 15 degrees. So we get about 60 feet past this tree, again, heading in the direction of where we know that old road is. That's our goal, to get to that old road. And 60 feet past it, all of a sudden, there's just this wall of rhododendron. It's like, oh, good Lord, how are we going to get through this? And that's when I noticed low down, pretty close to the ground, there was this darkness. It had all this greenery. So it was kind of like there was a tree there that had fallen years before, and then the bottom, the part that was laying against the ground had rotted out a bit. That's what it looked like. But it was big enough in there that it just caught your eye, this darkness. So I'd look in there, and looking back, what appeared to be 2 big brown eyes looking at this dead on, not moving at all. Now, because it was so low, it wasn't like the Sasquatch alarm bells went off, but it certainly wasn't acting like a bear. Wild bears don't, hold still. The shape of the eyes weren't like a cougar. It was like very flattish. So I videotaped this. We subsequently got interviewed on Ancient Mysteries about this with, I think, maybe with Leonard Nimoy was on. Good Lord, it has been 30 years. And after about 30 seconds of looking at these, clearly, 95% they were eyes, they started to sway back and forth just a little bit. That's when we knew it was an animal. It was highly probable it was an animal, and now they're moving. Clearly an animal now. Now, at this point, we're not feeling really fearful. We're curious. What the heck? The kids, right at the base of this hill, the kids had this sighting 2 weeks earlier. We both thought there was something to this. The veracity of their story was pretty strong. So what is it? It's not acting like a bear, but it's low, so we don't know, whatever. So we decide, what the heck? Why don't we just walk toward it? I took about 1 or 2 steps toward these set of eyes. Suddenly, what I later deduced, at the time I didn't think of it, it was just so freaky. Starting at the center and then moving out, these eyes gave off a reddish glow. Like the way I have described it is like 60% of the intensity of an exit sign in a darkened movie theater. Like just, like starting small and then getting bigger. Thankfully, it didn't make that noise. That would have really scared us. But you got this like red. And later, after going down, reading about probably what had happened, whatever this animal was, when mammals get scared, their eyes dilate. So that's probably what happened. But with the redness, and having read a lot about alleged Bigfoot encounters, in Green's book, DeHinden, Peter Byrne, all those guys, and seeing the red, and Grover Krantz also talking about it, was that the probability that this in fact was Bigfoot went way up because people report this weird red eye glow. So that stopped us. It was pretty creepy. We're like, okay, what does that mean? Is it scared? Is it going to charge? Whatever. So we stopped. What do we do now? So I remember thinking, why don't we do this? I'll move to the right. Again, a lot of vegetation around us. If I move to the right and Daryl moves to the left, whatever this animal is approximately 40 feet away from us might then think that we're trying to surround it. And then maybe it gets up and leaves and we can get a clearer view to see exactly what it is. So I start moving down to the right. I get about 15 feet down. And I get about that far, and I hear Daryl all of a sudden with genuine fearful emotion go, okay. And I look back, he has a camera as well. He had an actual old VHS camera where you put the tape in the side of, it was called a high 8. It had got the eyes low. I look back at Daryl, and he's taping, but he's not taping down. He's taping at an upward angle. I see him like pointing. He's looking through that big old viewfinder that used to be on those things, and he's like putting his finger in front. Okay, it's right here. Excuse me if I'm crying right now. It's right here. And he does that for about just under 30 seconds. In that time, I'm kind of slowly coming back to where he is. Again, you move 3 feet in this stuff. It's so that you can't see what you just saw. So I can't see what it is he's taping. I get closer, and then the camera goes limp in his hand, and he looks at me now with tears in his eye. And he's whispering to me, he's like, it's right there. It's standing right there. And I'm like, oh my God, we have no weapon. We have no bear spray. I don't exactly know what it is he's seen. Part of you is thinking, well, maybe we saw these eyes, definitely the red glow, but maybe he's thinking he saw something. But his reaction was pretty strong. I've had people since that happened, going, why didn't you just walk right in? I go, dude, it was a palpable fear, man. It was just like, whoa. He felt very vulnerable. So I'm trying to keep him from totally flipping out. He's like, okay, what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, you just taped something for about 30 seconds. Seems like you got something. We have no weapon. We're way the heck up this hill. Why don't we head back down and take a look at that videotape? So we start back down the hill, and we'd stop, we listen, we don't hear anything, we don't smell anything, we just, just kind of checking it. We get down, and I'm really, really curious to see this tape. So we pop the tape in. Remember, the TV was on the ground, it was on the floor. And he rewinds it and plays it. And I'm really close to the TV, right up, and I see his finger come in. And as he was pointing, this big, like a big worm, white worm comes in from the left, and he says, right here, Bob. And I'm like, what's he looking at? Maybe he's just scared. I rewind the tape, and then I step back from the TV. We play it again, and I'm looking at it. Oh, I just go, oh, my Lord. And I remember looking over to the side and just telling myself, my internal voice going, be objective, be objective. You're into Bigfoot. Don't pull a Rorschach test on this where you want it to be there. What are the possible rational explanations or known explanations? So you look at this tape, and about 30 feet directly in front of him, sticking out of the side of this thick rhododendron bush, about approximately 5 feet high, you see this huge Schwarzenegerian mountain gorillian upper arm sticking out, and it's light colored, beigeish. Again, it's VHS tape, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly on the color, but it was definitely, where a mountain gorilla has the big bulging deltoid. There's like a deltoid out there, and then where the armpit would be, there's darkness, and then where the beginning of a torso would be is just maybe you see an inch of that, then it's all behind that bush. The only thing sticking out is this arm. So I remember seeing that, and holy moly. And it's kind of matching the description of what the kid said at the bottom of the hill a few weeks earlier. I remember reasoning, okay, well, if that is a humanoid arm, then it stands to reason, however obstructed it may be, if you go at like a 45-degree angle up from the tip of that potential shoulder, there should be something in the shape of a head. And lo and behold, if you go up at about a 45-degree angle, there is this same color as the arm, except for the facial area, which is dark. You have this kind of chrome-domey, whitish head, like humanoid head. You can't see where it connects to the shoulder because part of the bush is there. The arm is there the full time. And then this head, you see, there's about 2 or 3 tiny branches in front of it. Well, then rewind again and play the tape. And twice within that, I believe, roughly 30 seconds, you see this quote unquote head tilt. Now I understand why Daryl said he's going like when he was taping, he's like, okay, this head tilts out. Like imagine you were like a ninja behind a tree and you just are peeking out around and then really quickly it goes back, like just blending. And again, that's consistent with stories and when Native American tribes, people who said hunters who said they walked and then they look and there's one like leaning up against a tree, trying to blend in or acting like a tree stump or something. The next day, we decided to go back up the hill. We went with two other people, no guns still or anything. We figured it's not going to be there. And lo and behold, when we get there, where the eyes were, there's nothing there. And where the white shoulder head thing, which was approximately 20 feet to the right of where the eyes were, there's nothing there. So we decided we're going to keep exploring through there to still get to the road and see if we can find anything. We felt more comfortable now that we had 4 people. Literally, at times, you're on your hands and knees. This stuff is so thick. And we get, I would guess, 20 feet past where this humanoid image was standing, and we part the vegetation, and through that was an approximate 25-foot long, 15-foot wide nest. Clearly, some type of animal had made this. It was just all matted down. Get in there, I'm immediately reminded of mountain gorillas who make their nests near the tops of hills because it's a prime defensive position. You hear something coming up, you can head out the back way because it's harder for whatever's coming up to slog up than it is for you just to go and leave. So we're sitting in this little nest area. And at the base of it, again, and it still has that roughly 10, 12, 15-degree angle to it. Well, in that vegetation, on the edge of it where the vegetation hasn't been matted down, there's like a hole. It's like you can tell, it looks like something or things have been crawling in and out of there. And if you went through that hole just slightly to the right and you go down approximately 25 feet, that's where the log was where we saw the eyes. We go down and look there, and it became clear when we were that close to that log that there's no way that what Daryl got on video with the shoulder and the head, that was what we saw there. They were 99.9% positive were 2 different beings. What I think the likely explanation is that there was a small one hiding in that little black where we saw the red eye glow. And mom, dad, big brother is back in the thick stuff, keeping an eye on us. And as soon as we made that potentially threatening gesture of separation, then it moved. I forgot to mention one thing. Daryl said the reason he turned to tape is that he peripherally saw something taking a sidestep, like a human figure sidestepping to the left. So Daryl and I, he'd got a couple hair samples. They were given to a guy named a primatologist named Sterling Bunnell. All I know is that the guy exists. He was in the Bay Area. And his report, and actually a copy of that report is, you can see it at the Willow Creek Museum. They had got a hold of it years ago. And essentially what he said, and this is again pre-DNA, and he used, I guess, a powerful microscope. He thought the internal structure of the hairs we gave him were very similar to Bagagthrix and chimpanzee samples he had. So he felt pretty convinced these were not, and they weren't human hair. Humans are the only indigenous known primates in North America. So that was another interesting element. So what I tell people is, look, when you take everything together, Bunnell's report, that nest we found, the kids' report at the bottom of the hill, witnessing red eye, Daryl's video, and the history of the area, when you take that all together, that's why I tell people, I think in all strong probability, like I would go, 99.9, that there was probably 2 Sasquatches there that day. When something like this happens, you also have to, I think you should, if you are scientifically minded, which I think is a very good thing to be as far as knowledge is concerned. You have to say, okay, could I have been hoaxed? Well, if I was hoaxed, Daryl has like Sean Penn caliber acting chops. He had set something up there, something electrical to look like red eye glow. Had a guy back there in a suit with the arm and the head, and they matted down so that becomes more ridiculous than the possibility there was actually a Sasquatch-like creature there. So that was pretty wild. As far as afterwards, it was more of a confirmation of a belief I had. I thought these things probably did, and it was just a really cool, lucky experience. I mean, if I had never made that phone call to Willow Creek, it never would have led to this chain of events. I think with Daryl, it affected him more. He started buying into the notion that I think a faction of the Hoopa, Native Americans, think it's not a good thing to see one of these things, and bad luck will happen to you. So like shortly after, there was a terrible, I don't want to go into details on it, but there was a terrible tragedy in his, not immediate family, but, well, actually it was part of his immediate family. There was a death involved. And so he thought that maybe this was part of that. But I made a film, not my recent one, the dramatized one, but a film about a trail up there 6 years ago called A Squatchalypse Now, a summer on and around the Bigfoot trail. Is an actual trail. And part of that, I wanted to interview Daryl. So this would have been 24 years after this happened, what his thoughts were now. And they were the same. He says he was convinced, and he's still into Bigfoot. He thinks that, that we were within at least one, probably 2 of those things that day. So I would say it was definitely, in a naturalistic sense, nature-wise, that was the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. Since then, I still find a lot of interest. I actually co-hosted a Bigfoot podcast called The Bigfoot Show for years. I stopped doing it about 7 years ago, but I'm still interested in it. I was interested in making a film, and of course, Bigfoot is a theme I still find interesting. So I wrote and directed, and it's now available on Amazon. It's called Unverified. Part of what happened on the hill is kind of part of it. It really the film revolves around the issue of kill, no kill. On the one hand, you have that desire, that of discovery. You want to see if these things actually are real. And then on the other hand, but do you really want to kill one in order to do so? So the film is about this character, played by me, thank you very much, who thinks he has found a way to do it without killing one. In other words, getting some kind of tracker into one getting some DNA, keeping it private, and then when the animal dies its own natural death, then recovering the body to then perhaps reveal it to the world. So it revolves around that. It's also a thriller, unverified. Sorry, it's not just, gotta put the plug in. Yeah, it's still a phenomena. You know, anytime I just drove back from Portland and you drive along that north coast, and I drove right by that hill where it happened. It's about a mile. It's only a mile off of 101 up that valley where the town of Requa is. It's kind of like you're pretty darn sure there's still some of those things in there. So I'm always keeping an eye out. If you're ever up there as well, I would keep an eye out too, because who knows?
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. The sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. It's Pickup Man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, bucking hay bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something coming backwards in double time, getting in the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards in double time, getting in the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards in double time, getting in the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, fried chicken, porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.